I used to be a doorman concierge at a condo in Midtown Manhattan. One night around 2 a.m., I got a call on the desk phone. A man was telling me that someone in my building was posing nude in front of his window with the lights on, and that he was doing all kinds of sexual things to himself. He expressed concern for his daughter. Her bedroom could see everything. I asked him what floor it was on and such, and I also told him that there isn't much I could do about it since people can do what they want in their property, and that I recommended he closed his blinds and such. I then realized that the apartment he described was supposed to be vacant. I then started to get pretty damn nervous. I was 19 at the time, and I thought of all the horrible possible scenarios that could happen. I thought some stranger snuck into the building and started squatting in an empty condo. I grabbed my pocket knife, and instead of taking the elevator, I took the emergency staircase 3 stories up to the floor of the apartment to avoid alerting anyone of my presence. I finally get up the third floor, and I notice the elevator still at the lobby floor where I left it. I then slowly start to approach the supposed vacant apartment door. I slowly turned the doorknob to see if it were open. It was locked, and I slowly inserted the key, trying to make as little noise as possible. I open the door and see all the lights are off, except for a light coming from the room the man described seeing a naked man in. My heart started pounding. I had to convince myself that I lived in a physical universe, and that it would not be possible for that naked man to know of my presence. I was incredibly quiet. I took off my shoes before entering the hardwood floor apartment. In my socks, holding nothing but shoes and a small pocket knife, I start to approach the bedroom where the door was closed, but the light was clearly on. As I slowly walked toward the door, I noticed that the floor was wet, as if they had exited the shower. Someone was definitely here. I gently placed my hand on the bedroom door, debating whether to try and open the door slowly or to go in fast. I made my decision. I burst into the room. I see nothing. I quickly look around the room, quickly look in the closet, and then under the bed. Nothing. The room was furnished because it was used as a showroom for open houses to potential customers. I find nothing, except a pile of what appeared to be semen on the window and floor. I was so confused. I also started to freak out because someone was here and now they're not. Where could they be? I put my shoes back on, then turned on all the lights in the apartment and do a full sweep. I find nothing. I begin to exit the apartment and call the elevator to head back to the lobby. The elevator doors open, and to my shock, I see moist footprints on the marble floor of the elevator. I didn't know what to think. I knew I had to get back to my desk. I rush back to the lobby, head straight for my security camera system, and backtrack all cameras in the lobby, outside for the last 45 minutes. Then I saw it. Not 2 minutes after I entered the emergency staircase, the elevator doors open, and a man in a giant trench coat and fedora exits the elevator and walks outside from the lobby entrance, seemingly barefoot. Have you ever been to a morgue? No? And thank God. But I spent the night there and miraculously didn't go crazy. The fact is that my older brother works as an orderly at the morgue and he was on the night shift, and it was on that evening that his wife decided to give birth, and I helped him out like a brother, offering to sit on duty for him. In general, I am not an impressionable person. I don't believe in mysticism, and I'm not afraid of the dead. I took my laptop with me and sat quietly playing Stalker. Around 3 a.m. I started to feel sleepy, and I decided that I might as well get some sleep. The dead wouldn't run away anywhere. About an hour later, I was awakened by a steady knocking sound. Woke up, I automatically opened the door, but there was no one there. I began to slowly wake up and listened. The sound came from the refrigeration chambers. As I got closer, I identified the box where the sound was coming from. I didn't know whether there was a body in this box or if it was empty, but I didn't feel any particular desire to open it. After a minute, he finally made up his mind and pulled the door towards himself. The knocking immediately stopped, and the cyanotic body of a man appeared before my eyes. Quickly slamming the door, I returned to the table and heard a knock again, this time from another cell. I vaguely remember what happened next. I ran and opened all the doors, and the knocking again and again came from another place. Then I fell. I woke up in the morning when I felt my brother shaking my shoulder. I didn't say anything to him. I was afraid that he would laugh, but he thought that I was just sleeping all night. Only 6 months later, while drunk, my brother told me that this is how the dead always scare newcomers. Night security here. I stopped an active burglary at one of our accounts. I checked the whole exterior of the building. No cars or signs of people other than an AC that had fallen to the ground. It was windy and the wood it was supported by looked kinda old, so I figured it was a natural fall. Just to be sure, I did an extra check around the building, making sure to put my flashlight in every window. Nothing. Go back to put the AC unit back on its stand, and it made a very loud cracking noise. Suddenly someone started walking into the room and had asked who I was, so I assumed it was a business owner in the building there overnight, since the area where the AC had fallen was way too small for anyone to crawl through. Well, I was dead wrong about that when they got close enough to me that I could see they were wearing a full ski mask like straight out of a movie. They pushed the AC unit back out and onto my feet and started climbing through the hole directly into me, so I took off across the street, called the cops, and he ran the opposite way. Police arrived, closed off the entire major street I saw him run to, brought a police negotiator and 3 K9 units. Guess it was a slow night. Every cop wanted action. Turns out, Guy hadn't even gotten away with anything, and none of the offices inside even looked like someone had gone through them, so I must have gotten there within a minute of him. Anyways, only a month worth of seeing that guy crawl through the hole directly towards me in my dreams. It was a quiet night shift, most of which I spent reading another manual issued by the supervisor. There's an incoming call. I put on my headphones and introduce myself. On the line, a nervous middle-aged woman on the verge of hysteria says that the neighbors are behaving strangely, and she is alone in the house and is afraid. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, she was awakened by the doorbell. I looked through the peephole. Nothing was visible. That is, not only was the light not on, but there was no light through the window on the landing. It was black, as if the peephole had been covered with chewing gum. A neighbor is outside the door asking for some sugar. What's sugar like at 3 o'clock in the morning? Regular granulated sugar for compote. Open the door. The caller thought for a moment and rightly refused to open the door. Come on, tomorrow. And the neighbor is not far behind. Open it. Open it. She made noise outside the door for about 10 minutes. The client threw a chain and threatened the police. For some time, everything was quiet, and then they pounded on the door as hard as they could. A male voice yells, "You are flooding us. Open it immediately." The client called the police, where some sleepy duty officer told her that all the squads were leaving, but he would contact her by radio and they would come to her. Wait. Meanwhile, the neighbor below gave up his attempts to break into the apartment. No more than 5 minutes had passed when the doorbell rang again. The official voice introduced himself as a police officer and said that they had received a call. 5 minutes. We're all out. The voices of neighbors were added to the police officer ringing and threatening consequences if the squad was not allowed into the premises. They don't answer questions. They block the door. The client locked herself in the room and found the telephone number of the crisis center, left after the death of her husband, because she did not know where else to call. I asked to take the phone out into the hallway, suspecting that the caller had delirium, although she looked fully oriented, only very frightened. I heard blows rumbling on the iron door and a polyphonic chorus of people shouting in different ways so that it was almost impossible to make out anything. As I listened to this in some shock, it seemed to me that more and more voices, female and male, were being added to the cacophony, as if the entire space outside the door was filled with a crowd of angry people. The client began to cry into the phone and read the "Our Father." Trying to shout over the choir, I began to ask the address, again and again, but the woman continued only to cry and pray, and in the background people were screaming their stories about granulated sugar, about the flood, utilities, parcels, the police. In sum, at that moment, in disbelief, I discerned my own voice among the noise, shouting something about contacting the Social and Psychological Assistance Service and insisting on a personal conversation. Something on the other side of the threshold in my voice promised to help and figure everything out. I managed to shout into the headset that the woman should under no circumstances open the door. The noise in the headphones intensified. The connection was interrupted. I used to work at a small hotel, and the manager there told me a terrifying night shift story. It was about midnight when she got a call at the front desk from a man. He said that he's with his 8-year-old daughter who dances competitively and needed advice on what she should wear. She gave him some basic fashion advice. He asked my manager, "What about fishnet leggings? Do you think those are too sexy?" Then proceeds to talk in graphic detail about how he thinks his own daughter has been trying to seduce him for weeks, and how he's starting to enjoy seeing her dance in these cute outfits. Meanwhile, my manager is looking through a computer system trying to figure out who this man is so she can call the cops. However, the room he was reportedly in was empty. The man ends up hanging the phone up before she could find out where he was truly calling from. A couple months later, at around 11 p.m., my manager answers the desk phone. A familiar voice asked her if she could help him pick out an outfit for his daughter's next dance recital. She asked him, "Let me guess you want to know if she should wear fishnet leggings." The man immediately hangs up the phone. I work at a crisis nursery, which is a child care facility that provides emergency and respite care for children under the age of 7. I used to work graveyards all the time. I have to say first that I am absolutely a non-believer in paranormal stuff. At all. That being said, at 2 in the morning in a dark room when you and 2 or 3 other girls in their 20s are the only adults in the building, shit gets creepy sometimes. Now, the facility I work in was named for a child that was beat to death by one of their parents. The nursery was started in their name as a way to hopefully prevent another child dying a violent death at the hands of a stressed-out caregiver. So the story that goes around is that this kid's spirit haunts the nursery and is mostly active at night. I get told this on one of my first grave shift, and I'm like, whatever. Scare the newbie. That stuff doesn't really bother me. Well, later that night, one of the kids got up to use the bathroom. One of my coworkers helped the kid back to bed and returned to where we were all sitting. Pretty soon, someone hears the water running in the bathroom. They go check it out. Yep, it's running. The coworker swears up and down that it was off when she and the kid left. Kind of weird, but I honestly think they were just trying to scare me. Well, they tell me that one of the reasons that everyone thinks this place is haunted is that many different people have reported different children asking about that kid, as in, why doesn't that kid have to go to bed, while they're pointing at nothing. I brush it off, basically forget about it. A few weeks later, I was in the sleep room, the bedroom where all the kids sleep. There must always be an adult in the room with the children. By myself. I'm just chilling, reading a book with a book light. The rest of the room is pitch black and silent. All of a sudden, this kid, probably 4 or 5, sits bolt upright in bed and says, "Hey, how come they aren't asleep? Why do they get to play? I want to play too." All while pointing at a wall with no kids anywhere in the vicinity. Instant crazy shivers all over me. I was so scared I almost screamed. I refused to be alone in there from that moment on. I worked a security gig in an abandoned hotel, which sat directly on the river. When the rooms had balconies, they would hang out over the water. The hotel had closed down and had been stripped bare by the owners. I'm sitting in the office and I hear a creak, 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 from left to right on the floor above me. The hotel was wood frame and creaked like a house when someone walked around. This sounded exactly like someone walking the hall on the floor directly above the office. I go up to the next level and into the hall. The hotel itself was only 4 floors high, but long. The hall was bare walls, rooms with no doors, and only a single dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the hall. I have seen my share of horror movies and know this can only be trouble, but I start walking down the hall anyway. After all, it's my job to keep people out. I get about a quarter way down the hall and I hear rustling coming from a room. I draw my mag light, one of the 3 C-cell ones, and get ready to use it. I slowly peek into the room and discover that it's the wind blowing in from the river and moving a curtain. Now freaked, I start checking the other floors and find nothing, but I know someone is in the building. I make my way back down to the ground floor, still finding nothing, and go into the old ballroom. It's a wide open space. Out of the corner of my eye, I see someone moving, so I turn and shine my light on them, ready to defend myself. That's when I realize that it was my reflection in a broken mirror on the wall. After that, I noped the hell out of there and spent the rest of the night in my car in the parking lot. About 2 weeks after that, the place burned down. After all this time, I'm still convinced that someone was in the building, but I never found any evidence that there was. So, working the night shift at a hotel front desk is an interesting job. One night, our hotel was hosting a college baseball team. The team came back around 11 p.m. and went up to their rooms and to bed. No big deal. Then around 1 a.m., the coaches came back absolutely hammered. They went up to their rooms, and that was the last I heard from them for about an hour. While I was setting up for breakfast, I heard the elevator ding around 2-3 a.m., daylight savings night in the spring. Out of the elevator bursts one of the coaches, and he runs straight out the front door. Odd, but okay, whatever. He comes running back inside, shouting, "He fell! He fell!" I run outside while pulling out my phone and dialing 911 to see one of the coaches who had come back, face down on the ground in a huge puddle of blood. I have had a bit of rescue training, so I knew to put him in the rescue position so he wouldn't choke on his own blood. The paramedics got there, and as they were loading him up, one of them wiped off his forehead, and there it was. The guy had fallen out of a 3rd-story window straight on his forehead and split it open so wide and deep you could see his brain. He was life-flighted up to the bigger hospital up north. He lived. I got a raise the next day. Around 12 years ago, I was working security at a small company's headquarters in New York City. My partner for the night had called in sick, so I had to work from 12 to 6 all by my lonesome. Now, normally, this wouldn't be a problem. I just had to sit in the back room, watch some cameras, and occasionally head out for a sweep. Nothing to it, right? Well, as it turns out, one of the employees had stayed in the building after hours and had managed to avoid my co-worker's sweep from the previous shift. I first noticed a movement in my peripheral vision on one of the screens, and then again a few minutes later. This was odd, because I was used to quiet nights in this particular building. I was a little scared when I headed out for my sweep, but it was my job, so I grabbed my flashlight and headed out to begin. I had to start the sweep in one big hallway, and right as I entered, I saw a flash of movement at the end of it. At this point, I was sufficiently freaked out. I stood frozen for a minute or so, looking into the semi-darkness, unsure of what to do. The decision was taken out of my hands, however, as I heard a gunshot resound down the hallway. In what was the scariest moment of my life, I slowly walked down that hallway to investigate. I reached the end and saw to my left that the president's office light was on. Slowly, I approached the door and creaked it open, scared shitless. What I saw will forever haunt me. The man had taken a seat in the president's chair and shot himself. In any case, I threw up a few times and called the police. I got the next 2 weeks off. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. I work as a transporter in a hospital. About 2 years ago, we moved from the old city hospital into a new state-of-the-art facility. The old hospital was built in the 1930s and was showing its age, and at night was just plain creepy. Each floor had an east and west wing. The east wing of the 4th floor was the first wing to be shut down about 2 weeks before the move. One night at around 9:30, I'm up on the floor to get a patient from the west wing. I see a small group of nurses and aides who all used to work on the, now closed, east wing. They looked visibly shaken. I walked over to see if everything was okay. They told me that they had decided to walk through their old wing for nostalgia's sake. When they were over there, the phone at the nurses' station started ringing. The computers and phones had not yet been moved. Not sure what to do, one of the nurses reached over the counter and answered the phone. The nurse told me there was a woman's voice on the other end and that she sounded confused. This is the conversation as best I can remember it. "This is, Rogt. How can I help you?" asked the nurse. "Hello. Who is this?" "This is Amrit Saur. I'm a nurse. Is there anything I can help you with?" "Where am I?" "This is hospital name. Are you patient here?" "Oh, okay." Then the line went dead. That's when the nurse finally looked at the screen on the phone to see where the call was coming from. The phone gave the room number directly next to the nurse's station. The rooms by this point had all been cleared out and the phones removed. They could see directly into the room and see that there was nobody in there. That's when they bolted toward the west wing where I was getting off the elevator. I avoided that wing for the rest of my time there.